Hello, everybody, again. I hope you are well. My name is Georgia Byng, and I am here to read you Molly Moon's incredible book of hypnotism. We've got to chapter 11. This is a book I wrote. And here for you to look at today is a sculpture by Richard W.M. Hudson. He's the guy who made something that I showed in an earlier chapter. He makes things out of wood. He bashes the wood and burns the wood and carves the wood and leaves the wood outside and dips it in the sea, does all sorts of things to wood, and then eventually he finds that something comes out of the wood that he's playing around with. And I really like his things. So there's another sculpture from him. But before more ado, let's get to chapter 11. The next morning, the orphanage awoke to the lovely smell of croissant and pizza bread, and the aroma of baking matched Molly's sunny mood. Edna's Italian theme was going over the top in the dining room. She'd brought in her hi-fi, and opera was playing loudly. Laid out on the tables were books on Italy. "Been to the library, Edna?" Molly asked, taking a crunchy croissant and a sweet bun from a plate. "Yeah, you see, I'm a fan of Italy," Edna explained politely, as if Molly didn't know. "I love Italy, Italian cooking in particular. The Italians really bleeding know how to live." She poured Molly a hot chocolate. "Let me do that, Edna," said Miss Addiston with a toothless smile, tugging the chocolate jug from Edna's stubborn grip. "Molly, my dear, where would you like to sit?" She led Molly across to the window as if she was royalty. Children whispered as Miss Addiston swept past, her false teeth necklace swinging with every step. This morning she had a huge pair of knickers on her head. She was wearing her crinoline suit, except that it had been all snipped up maniacally all over and was full of cuts and slashes. It looked like the mad creation of some crazy fashion designer. "I like your suit," said Molly. "Oh, thank you, Molly. I did it myself last night with a pair of scissors." Behind them, someone screamed. Miss Addiston turned with her usual foul expression, for nothing had changed in the way that she felt towards other children, and looked horrified. Hazel Hackersley had hit herself with her mug and tipped hot chocolate all over her head. "What do you think you're doing, Hazel?" Miss Addiston said furiously. "Excuse me, Molly." There was another yell as Roger chucked milk all over his hair. Miss Addiston snapped her false teeth castanets and descended upon them like a bad-tempered lobster. "That's it, Roger Fibbin. For that you get the nip." And click-clacking her way towards the quaking Roger, she gave him a nasty nip on the arm. "Ah!" Roger cried out, his eyes wide with alarm. Molly winced. She hadn't hypnotised Miss Addiston to be quite that fierce. Edna, who'd come over to Molly's side, whispered in her ear, "I think Agnes has gone a bit bleeding fun in the head, you know?" When Molly left the dining room, she noticed Gordon Boyles hitting himself on the head with a croissant. She looked at him in a concerned way. Molly missed Sunday school. Instead, all morning, Edna and Miss Addiston were at her disposal. Edna made her delicious snacks, and Miss Addiston gave Molly a foot massage, whilst Petula sat on her lap. By 12 noon, Molly was feeling wonderfully relaxed and ready for the afternoon's challenge. The other children left on foot, but Edna escorted Molly down to the minibus, carrying her rucksack and opening the back door for her. Then she climbed into the front seat with Miss Addiston. Molly, with Petula on her lap, was chauffeured to the Briarsville Guildhall. The hall was a Victorian stone building with a copper-green pepper pot roof. Its steps fanned out in two directions like a moustache on the front of a building, and today its steps were covered with children. Children dressed up in all sorts of outfits, in sequin tops, in tops, hats, and tails. Some were dressed to sing and dance, some were dressed to do magic, some were dressed to act a part, and some were dressed to do a comedy routine. All were prepared for the talent competition, and each child was accompanied by a parent. Molly found it difficult to pass. There were parents tying back hair, parents stitching last-minute hems, and parents giving pep talks. "Just belch it out, Jimmy. Show 'em what you're made of. Sally, don't forget to smile when you sing. Remember, Angelica, it's all in the eyes." It certainly is, thought Molly, and she made her way up the steps. No one noticed the plain, gangly girl who squeezed past. No one noticed the minibus parked on the road that waited for her return. Clutching her rucksack with the hypnotism book safely in it, Molly made her way to the desk at the front hall. "Name?" asked a lady with rhinestone-rimmed spectacles. "Molly Moon." "Address?" "Hardwick House, Orphanage." The woman handed Molly a card with her name on it. "Make sure you're backstage when the show starts, and you'll be told when you're on. Good luck," she said, with a kind smile. "Thanks, I need it." Molly walked down a parquet-floored passage to the tall-ceilinged grand hall, where hundreds of metal chairs with red canvas seats were lined up in rows, some already occupied. Molly saw a low platform in the middle of the room with 6 chairs on it. These were for the judges. The passages around Molly echoed with voices singing musical scales as contestants warmed up. She walked on past Hazel and Cynthia, who both made a face at her, and entered the backstage room. This was like stepping into a cage of brightly coloured birds, all squawking, and clucking. Mothers and fathers fussed over their children, children fussed over their costumes. Last-minute nerves filled the air with tension. The sight of these family groups gave Molly a pang of envy. She turned away and sat down in the corner in front of a television which was on with the sound turned off. Molly felt that it was only fair that she should win the talent competition. These other kids had had it happy and easy all their lives compared with her. Molly's confidence was slipping. She watched the TV, hoping it would calm her and stop her palms from sweating. A commercial break was showing the Cube ad. The same man from the Cube poster on the billboard overlooking Briarsville was now on the television, tipping back a can of Cube. Molly felt very at home, and her concentration focused on the familiar advert. "Oh, you're so cute! Can I sip your Cube?" Molly spoke the lines of the woman in the sparkly swimming costume. Then she echoed the thoughts of the hero of the ad. "Hey, the world really looks better with a can of Cube in my hand." Now Molly knew a deep voice over the top of the scene was saying, "Cube, it'll quench more than your thirst." Molly watched and felt homesick for Rocky. They always laughed together when they acted out the Cube ad. She wished they were both on that paradise beach now. But at that moment, Mrs. Toadley walked into the waiting room. The teacher's explosive sneezing shook Molly from her thoughts. "Achoo! Oh!" she said disdainfully, wiping her nose with her hanky. I'm surprised to see you're here. I didn't know you had any particular talents." "You'd be surprised," said Molly coolly. "I'm a judge, you know," declared Mrs. Toadley with another sneeze. "I know, and I'm really looking forward to performing for you," said Molly cheerfully as Mrs. Toadley waddled away. After 5 more minutes, a man with a shiny red waistcoat came in and began handing out cards with numbers on. "May I go last?" Molly asked politely. "Certainly," The man gave her a card with the number 32 on it. And Molly's card with her name on it, he took that from her. The competition began. Molly left the changing room when two boys began fighting over a magic wand. She stepped up to the wings of the stage and waited next to the woman who sat on a stool in charge of the curtains. From there, Molly had a side view of the stage. After every act, the woman pulled a cord and the heavy velvet curtains swung shut with a swoosh of musty air. The compere, the man in the red waistcoat, then hopped in front of the curtain and announced each performance. Molly watched the other contestants go before her. Tap dancers, jugglers, mime artists, ballet dancers, a boy with a drum kit who did a 5-minute drum solo, and a girl who did impersonations of TV stars. Some children took sheets of music up with them for a pianist who sat at a white piano on the side of the stage. She watched ventriloquists, singers, musicians, comedians, and a few who were overcome with stage fright. Each time an act finished, the performer went down the front steps to sit in the audience, and each time Molly's stomach fluttered with nerves. She peeped through a hole in the curtain to see what the audience looked like. In the front row she saw fat Mrs. Trinklebury staring up happily, but Molly could only see the front few rows lit up by the stage spotlight. The rest of the audience was in darkness. This made her panic. If she couldn't see the audience's eyes, how could she be sure they were looking at her? If a mother in the back row was fishing about in a handbag, or if a judge was doing up a shoelace, they might not look at Molly's eyes. If they weren't hypnotised, her secret would be out. Molly didn't know how to hypnotise a whole audience by using just her voice. The chapter on hypnotising people using the voice alone had been ripped out of her book. This was terrible. "Number 27, Hazel Hackersley," announced the compere. Hazel bustled onto the stage. Molly should have enjoyed the delicious moment. The night before she'd had a meeting with Hazel, but instead Molly was worrying about how to see her audience. Hazel's dance began. A dance? Really, it was more of a stamping around the stage. Hazel jumped and stomped as if she was hammering nails into the floor. She sang, or rather shouted, her cat song, the words of which had changed. Now it went, "I'm sorry I can't dance. I'm sorry I am a brat. I'm sorry that I'm a bully. It's just I am a brat. Meow." When she came off stage smiling, as if she'd just given an Oscar-winning performance, there was a shocked silence before a few people began to clap half-heartedly. "Oh dear," said the lady on the stool. "I don't think that'll win." "Number 28, announced the compere, and Molly's stomach cramped painfully, confidence draining out of her. The darkness in the audience was terrifying. She sat down, trying to compose herself, trying to get the feeling of hypnotism in her eyes, but doubts kept buffeting her, knocking her concentration. This was dreadful. And then Molly's desperate mind had a brainwave. She hoped it would work. "Number 32, said the compere. Molly's eyes stared and stared at the floor. Number 30 was a boy who did bird impressions. "Number 30, the compere corrected himself. The boy who did bird impressions was number 30. He made the audience ooh and ah. Number 31, a girl dressed as a Greek goddess, went on. While she sang her song, Molly struggled to pull herself together. It was now or never. She focused her eyes and tapped the compere on the shoulder. When he looked round, her eyes locked onto his. Then Molly turned to the curtain puller and locked her eyes onto hers too. Number 31 finished. The jolly man went back onto stage. "And now, last but not least," he said, "we have number 32. Yes, this time number 32, Miss Molly Moon." Molly walked onto the stage, her hands more sweaty than they'd ever been in her life. The curtain opened and the spotlight hit her face. Molly walked up to the microphone, her stomach twisting with nerves. She was suddenly filled with a fear that she couldn't remember how to hypnotise anything, let alone a whole audience full of Briar's villains. She looked out into the black hole of the hall and could feel the people out there all looking at her. The air was thick with anticipation. There was silence except for a few coughs and a sneezing fit from Mrs. Toadley. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen," she said nervously. "I am Molly Moon, and this afternoon I'm going to show you the talent that I have for reading minds." She heard a murmur of interested noises. "For this, I have to be able to see you, and so, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the hall lights will now go on." Shielding her eyes from the spotlight, Molly looked upwards. "Light controller, please, could we have the spotlight off and the audience light on?" In 2 switches, the stage spotlight went off, and the gang of lights above the audience came on. There were lots of people out there. In the front row, Molly noticed Hazel hitting herself with her cattail. "Hello, everybody," Molly said, feeling calmer. "Now, ladies and gentlemen, I can show you what I can do if you'll let me for a moment concentrate and think. Soon I will start to get telepathic thoughts, your thoughts, and I will tell you what you're thinking." Molly stared at the floor. From the audience's viewpoint, this girl looked very the part. There she stood, concentrating in a very theatrical way. Of course, all this mind-reading business was an act, but the girl was pretending very well. It would be interesting to see how she read their minds. Perhaps she had some plants in the audience who'd act as if they'd never met her before. Then, to their surprise, when the girl looked up again, each person in the hall thought how, on second glance, this girl was much more special than they had first thought. The wafer-thin, plain child was really rather enchanting. The longer the audience studied Molly, wondering why they hadn't seen her charm before, the more and more ensnared they became by her mesmerising glaze and gaze. "It won't take long now," Molly said, as she went methodically through the rows of gaping faces, checking each person's eyes. A second was all it took to check and to feel the fusion feeling getting stronger and stronger. Molly was amazed that most of the audience had fallen under her spell immediately, the judges included. Mrs. Toadley looked like an old toad with her mouth hanging open. Mrs. Trinkleberry looked as if she was about to have a fit of giggles. The only problem was a woman in the 6th row. "Madam, yes, you in the 6th row with the sunglasses on. Please, could you take them off?" When the woman removed her glasses, Molly found that she was already in a trance. A boy who had been to the loo almost slipped through Molly's net, but she caught him on the way back to his seat, and as he sat down, glazy-eyed, Molly was confident that every single person there was well and truly in the palm of her hand, sweaty as it was. She'd even eyeballed the light operator. "Now, dim the audience lights again, please," Molly told him. Under the shiny beam of the spotlight, she began to talk to her audience. "You are all under my command," she said. "You will all forget that I came onto the stage to read minds. Instead, you will think that I came on stage and... Molly's clear instructions reverberated through the Guildhall. Molly's act began. All the people sat back in awe. This Molly Moon's song and dance routine was so good, so accomplished, so entertaining that they felt they were witnessing a star being born. The girl was breathtakingly talented, charismatic and funny, with an adorable face. She danced so gracefully that her feet didn't seem to touch the ground. She sang like an angel, and she told jokes. Oh, such funny jokes! Jokes that made them laugh until they thought their sides would split. In reality, Molly was simply standing on the stage, describing to the audience what they thought they were seeing and hearing. Before she finished, Molly had a special word with Mrs. Toadley. From now on, you will tell everyone you meet what a horrid, bullying teacher you are, Molly told her, and Mrs. Toadley opened and shut her mouth like a fat goldfish to show that she agreed. Then Molly clapped her hands and instantaneously brought everyone out of their trances. The whole audience erupted into loud applause, cheers and wolf whistles. Number 32, Molly Moon. She was obviously and undisputedly the winner. She had more talent in her little toenail than all the others put together. And there she stood, dressed in a very ordinary skirt and top. It just went to show that all those fancy outfits really weren't necessary. Why, that Molly Moon had such stage presence that she didn't need a costume or makeup. There was something extra special about this girl. She was just so likeable. She definitely had that special magic that people called star quality. The audience clapped until their hands hurt. Molly stood there smiling and bowing. She liked this applause, this adoration. At last she went to sit down in the front row. People near her congratulated her profusely. "Oh, Molly, that was marvellous," stuttered Mrs. Trinklebury. Even Hazel Hackersley was smiling at her, doe-eyed, which Molly found a revolting experience. Then the judges walked up the aisle and to the stage. Mrs. Toadley was second in line after the mayor. "I'm a horrible bullying teacher, you know," Molly heard her tell the man behind her. "I know," he said. "I've got a child in your class." As the mayor announced Molly as the outstanding winner, the other judges nodded their heads like those nodding toys that you see on the back shelves of cars. "Quite simply the most talented child this town has ever had the pleasure to watch. So please put your hands together once and again for our very own homegrown Molly Moon." Molly stepped up to receive her prize money. She could hardly believe she'd done it. Her fervent wish on the hill above Briarsville as she gazed at the cube poster had been to become rich, popular and good-looking, and now, with a flash of her eyes, those wishes had been granted. "Thank you very much," she said coyly. As she clutched the fat envelope full of crisp new banknotes, she was seized by a strong feeling of wanting to leave the scene of her crime as quickly as possible. So, after posing for a few pictures, she left the stage and walked swiftly out of the building. Before anyone realised she was leaving, she walked down the Guildhall steps and climbed into the back of her chauffeur-driven minibus. "To the Briarsville Hotel," she ordered. Edna turned to smile at her. Petula jumped on her lap, and Miss Addison looked at her obediently. "Yes, Ma'am." With a screech of rubber tyres on the road, the car sped away. And that is the end of chapter 11. I hope you enjoyed it and have a happy evening or a happy day, happy sleep, happy time wherever you are, and happy hypnotizing if you're going to be doing any of that. Bye.